Okay, so right at the gate, I need to state into the record that Blue Sky is not my employer. I am self-employed. I don't happen to work, on behalf of Blue Sky in any way, shape, or form in making this statement. But I felt that the Blue Skies team and their response, uh, while it did highlight the fact that they decided to go dark in Mississippi, and I walked away from this from them, and I felt that the response was kind of a very boilerplate, sort of we're too small of a team to handle this sort of thing. We just don't have, we feel that this kinds of these laws apply too broadly. They disadvantage smaller teams and everything, and that's a valid point. I mean, complying with and creating the infrastructure to verify identity for a small team of developers would be a lot harder than it would be for somebody, the size of like Facebook and everything. But that was, the fact that I can summarize that in that short period of time compared to this, you know, uh, amount of stuff. The response on this was very very quick to summarize what their position is. The thing that I wanted to say is that I felt that it didn't actually go in, uh, explain some other aspects of this that were kind of overlooked by it. They didn't even brush on, that is to not even brush on the security implications of it, and I find that very rather concerning about it. I wanted to say that corporate America has repeatedly, demonstrated it violated the trust placed in it to safeguard our data. When the Epic leak happened not long ago, like a few Christmases ago, the only encryption on the or hashing that was on some of the more sensitive bits of data, which if you think about it would be people's emails. But if you have access to somebody's emails, then you have that's where they send most of the password reset emails to, so you're able to get into pretty much everything as a consequence of being able to get into their email addresses. But the only thing that they used to secure the people's email addresses at that point, was MD5 hashes, which were by that point already considered, outdated, because we had our hands on much more powerful, hardware than we had when MD5 was, the standard. I mean, it was very, very outdated, in terms of the hashing security that was on these websites, and everything. And it was rather pathetic. I mean, people broke it very, very quickly. They were able to get into people's emails very, very quickly as a consequence of this and everything. And unfortunately, a lot of corporate America has been that irresponsible with our data. We've seen this pattern, play out at multiple companies and everything. Do you really want to trust them to store your child's identification, because they will need to verify their identification? To verify, they're going to have to take some form of government ID, and that's going to be stored in some sort of database somewhere permanently. And what's going to happen when some hacker breaks into that database and breaches it, and it ends up on some site that's a clone of breach forms, and it ends up being spread across the dark net. Do you really want your child's identity, being sold and bought and sold on the dark web? Do you really trust these companies to be guardians of your data, to guard it in a safe, manner? Age verification laws will not protect minors. They will, if we were to require minors to provide identification to access these sites, it would put them in danger rather than safeguard them. I don't know if you've noticed, but data breaches have become so normal and everyday that we barely bat our eyes when a major company leaks data to malicious hackers who stole their database. Point being, we demanded if we demanded they show ID, those IDs would eventually be hacked by malicious hackers and then be repackaged and resold on the dark web. Age verification laws will not protect minors. In fact, it will only expose them to new harms. Considering how pedophiles have gone darknet too, do you really want your child's ID being resold on the dark web? Do you really trust them to store your child's identification? I wouldn't.